Hello to everyone in our audience, and especially to those of you in our virtual hub. My name is Duncan Dykes, and welcome to DocEdge 2022. I hope you're all enjoying the festival so far. So, for our guests today, we have Jason Loftus and Daxiong from the film Eternal Spring. It's great to have you guys with us.
Thanks for having us, Duncan. It's a pleasure.
Hi.
We also have with us today two translators to help with communication. We have Annabelle and Yijing. So to give a little overview of this, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll go to some questions from our virtual hub. So if you're in the audience in our virtual hub, then you can feel free to put some questions into the chat, and we'll be able to bring them up on screen. So for our first question, for Jason, when did you first encounter this story, and what inspired the decision to make this into a film?
So going back a few years now, we were making a kung fu video game called Shuyan Saga, and it featured a lot of hand-drawn artwork. And I heard about this artist who was living in New York at the time, which is where Daxiong is right now on the street. So he's playing the part. He was in New York at the time, and Daxiong had drawn for Justice League and Star Wars, and he'd also drawn for Louis Cha, who's a major kung fu novelist in the Chinese language. And I just thought this is perfect. He's got amazing artistic talent and also, the cultural background. So we brought him up, and we were working together in our studio in Toronto on this game. And then I learned how he had left China. First off, I learned that he came from the same hometown as his producing partner, Masha Loftus. But my wife, Masha, she's the daughter of a mid-level government official at the time in China, in Changchun. And so she had no connection with the Falun Gong community that Daxiong was part of, or any dissidents or persecuted groups there. So she was shocked hearing what, people had endured in her own city under her nose. And for me, I had an existing interest in the human rights situation in China. I was familiar with Falun Gong, but just hearing this remarkable story that Daxiong had to flee his hometown in the aftermath of this dramatic hijacking of the state television airwaves by a group of Falun Gong adherents. It was just a remarkable story. It's a heist story. And we were just seeing Daxiong with his illustrations. He'd been drawing some of the characters. He'd been drawing some of this story. And we just thought, what an opportunity to use animation, which we have our capacity in our studio for animation, to bring his illustrations to life to tell this story. Unfortunately, Daxiong was very cooperative and willing to go on this journey. We interviewed other witnesses who were from Changchun, and we were fortunate to find then that there's one individual, one surviving TV hijacker who had made his way out of China, and that's really what got this rolling as a film.
Thank you for that. Now, my second question, for Daxiong, what was the most important thing that you wanted to convey with your artwork in the film?
想对大雄提问，就是您想通过您的绘画作品表达什么呢？
It's we show the film, but the film is still not finished right now. This thing is still happening in China. A lot of my friends is died in that time. Unfortunately, they are not here. I'm outside China, so I will continue to do the things. This thing is to tell the truth to the people, to tell the truth for the China. This is the most important things. I still continue to do that for my friends, for my family, everything.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Now, for my next question, for Jason again, this film covers a painful recent bit of history. What did you feel were some of your biggest responsibilities in telling this story? And what were some of the biggest challenges with telling something of this period of history?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a few different aspects to that. There's the aspect of the fact that a number of these people, without giving too much away for people who haven't seen the film, there's a number of individuals who cannot share the story because they're no longer with us or they're imprisoned in China. And so one aspect is the responsibility of coming across a remarkable act of courage and story of defiance that I think has very universal themes in it. And something like this you come across it, you have a very unique way to tell the story with an artist like Daxiong, and you just want to do the story justice. So I feel a certain responsibility there for people who can't be here to be able to share their story. But I think the other aspect is, as a documentarian, there's an ethical responsibility when you're dealing with a sensitive subject and a group that is still heavily persecuted in China, to make sure that you're not causing any harm. And so this is a question constantly when we're interviewing people that are coming out of China. What are you comfortable sharing? What are you, is there anything that could cause harm here? But I learned a lot from the people who were coming out of China, because what you would find is that you'd hear stories when people were in a labor camp. In some cases, they were persecuted severely or tortured. And then later on, their conditions improved. And they didn't know why immediately, but later on they learned that their name had been mentioned. Someone from overseas had called a labor camp and said, "Hey, I know what you're doing to so-and-so," or their name had been mentioned in a human rights report or a media report. And that spotlight really helped them. So the witnesses who were coming out of China were saying not only they had gone through so much to be able to tell this story, but they also felt that speaking up was the best recourse they had to improve their situation, because the attention there helped them. And honestly, I really put that to use myself, because in the midst of making this film, the Chinese government contacted my business partners. Our game that Daxiong and I were making was being published by Tencent, which is a huge media company in China, a major player in the gaming space. And in the midst of making this film, the Chinese authorities contacted my business partners at Tencent, forced them to cut ties with my company. My wife's family members in Changchun in Northeast China were called by the Public Security Bureau and sort of given threats that, hey, we know what you're up to overseas. So you start to realize that, yeah, okay, there is a risk to telling these stories. These stories are sensitive. Even as a Western filmmaker, it's not necessarily a walk in the park. But then I learned from these individuals who were coming out of China, had gone through so much, and felt like the best thing you can do is shine a spotlight on it. And so that's what we did. We persisted. We made the film. And I think the reaction we're getting has really encouraged us that was the right decision.
Yeah, and as we can see, I mean, audiences are really responding to the film. I mean, you guys just won audience prizes at Hot Docs, and you've been kind of collecting prizes everywhere at the moment.
We're on quite a roll, and I'm really touched by that, because this film, like Daxiong knows, it's been like 6 years in the making. I think Daxiong's carried this story for a couple of decades with him now in his heart, having been so affected by it. But we spent, 5 to 6 years working on this, and it's a very unique mix of this live action and animation and this comic book look with a 3D perspective. So we're doing some original things here, and you don't know how people are going to receive it immediately. You connect with it, and you just hope that when you finally share it with audiences, that they're going to react the same way. And so, that first, the premiere in Thessaloniki a couple of months back, that was the first time for an audience to see it, and just the response of people, like, they were so engaged with the Q&A. People were coming up to us afterwards saying how emotional they were throughout the film. And then, we picked up a couple of prizes there, including the audience prize and a jury prize, Hot Docs. We've had 5 more in the US in the last 10 days, which, Oklahoma tonight, we got Dead Center, the jury prize, New Jersey at Lighthouse, we won both jury and audience, and also out west as well in California festival. So it's been an amazing run, and we're really touched, because this is, we make this film to share this story, and audiences are obviously connecting with it.
Now, my next question is for Daxiong.
Yeah.
How did making this film change how you viewed the hijacking event?
下一个问题是问大雄，请问您在制作这个纪录片的过程中，随着对事件更深入的了解，您对这个事件的态度和看法有什么变化吗？
因为我们这个做的时间大约是用了5年时间，不仅我变化，这个世界也在变化。在这个过程当中呢，发生了香港的事件，发生了新疆的事件。当时对法轮功的迫害呢，已经扩散到了对越来越多的中国人的迫害，包括现在对上海和北京的这个lockdown。我觉得这个世界也越来越认清了中国的现状。那么我呢，也在创作的过程中呢，越来越找寻到自己的这种意义。我觉得我更理解了我笔下的这些人物，我更能够体会到他们当时的能够想要把真相传递给中国人的这种心情。
Yeah. So because the whole film takes around 5 years to finish, and not only the Daxiong is changing, the world is changing along with over time, and in these 5 years, there's a lot of things happening, especially for Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and also Falun Gong. It's spreading, like the influence on Falun Gong, it's spreading to other people as well. And looking at like it's happening in Shanghai in China right now, he can realize and understand how these people feel, like what they're feeling now, because he has experienced it before.
Thank you very much for that. Now, my next question is for both of you. If there's one thing you hope the audience of this film leaves with, one idea or emotion, what would it be?
想问一下大雄，
Go ahead.
不好意思，在观众看完这部电影之后，你希望他们会有什么样的想法或者感受呢？
我先说。
Go ahead. 你先说吧。
Okay, I think, 我们现在这个时代，信息很发达，有很多的 technology， 我们都有手机，都有网络，好像沟通很容易。但是中国有10几亿人是与这个世界完全不一样的信息，我们还是活在一个被信息封锁的这么一个国度里。那么在这种情况下，讲述真相和传播真相就非常重要。如果把真相告诉给中国人，那么中国人他们就有他们真正的去选择对与错的机会。我们不是告诉他谁对谁错，而是要告诉他真相。这就是我希望能够在电影里传达的。
So for Daxiong, what he wants to express through this film is because in this world, there's a lot of new technology coming up, and communication seems to be like an easier way to kind of express yourself. But in China, there are like 14 billion of people in there. They're getting censored information from the government, and they're getting a whole new different perspective on things inside the wall. And through this film, Daxiong wants to tell all the Chinese, all the people in China that they can have another choice to know the truth. They don't really necessarily have to choose to believe that, but they at least have a choice to know what the truth is.
Thanks. Yeah, for me, there was something that really struck me, because you would think when people endured so much, and so, the aftermath of the TV hijacking was horrendous in China. Potentially from some human rights groups suggested thousands of people may have been arrested. We spoke with many witnesses who endured torture and abuse, and obviously there were deaths after this as well. So it's extremely severe, and you expect that when you speak with the witnesses, the people who survived after enduring this, they would think, well, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we went one step too far because the human cost was too severe. But it really isn't the sense that you get from speaking with the people, and even from the testimony of people who know the sort of key masterminds and people involved in the hijacking. It doesn't seem to be the case either. You get this real sense of hope, and that was something that I wanted to convey in the film, because I thought it was very unique and interesting, which is that despite what they had been through, these people still had this feeling that it was worth it. And yes, you know what? They may have paid dearly for what they did, but at the same time, there's hundreds of thousands or perhaps more Chinese people who witnessed this event who can never look at the state propaganda the same way. And as a result of that, they may be less willing to be complicit in human rights abuses that the government is responsible for in the future. They may be less trusting of certain narratives that are fueling these atrocities in the future. And so I thought that was really a remarkable thing. And I think it connected with this, for me, symbolically, like as a filmmaker, when you look at this, I look at it as in Chinese poetry, there's the plum blossom flower that's used sometimes, meihua, and it has a symbology to it. It signifies, because the flower actually blossoms when it's still winter. And so the meaning behind this is that even in the midst of suffering or difficulty, when times are still, when it's still the winter, when it's cold and it's harsh, there's this sense of hope that something may happen in the future. The spring is on its way. And I really wanted to convey that. And so that's why we use that symbology in the film as well, and it ties in, of course, beautifully with the name of the city, Changchun, which you can literally translate as eternal spring. And I thought that really captures the spirit of these individuals. That despite what's going on, there's this persistent effort, this persistent. You could look at spring as like a Prague Spring or an Arab Spring, this kind of movement for freedom. And I think you really sense that here is this persistence despite the challenges for a better future and more freedom.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. We're going to go now to some questions from our audience. So our first question we have from Charlie. Have any of the other people interviewed in the film been able to see the final movie?
Yeah, we had. Oh, go ahead.
请问你们两位都已经看过最终的那个成片了吗？
Yeah, we had a good crowd. So in New York, where Daxiong is right now, we played 2 sold-out shows at the Lincoln Center and IFC Center, and we had a lot of the other subjects in the film are based in New York, and so it was amazing to see them see the film and how they responded. You could see the catharsis for them about how they carried the story. A lot of them were saying when we spoke with them that they didn't know why they survived and others didn't. And I think that's something that victims of abuse, they go through, is this like, well, why am I alive? And why did this person die? And so for those that we spoke with, their ability to carry on that story and to have people see it and to see the crowds and to see how people responded to it, you could see how much that meant to them. That was just very, very satisfying. And then there were actually even people when we were in The Hague a month ago, or maybe almost 2 months ago now. We were playing at Movies That Matter there, and Daxiong had invited a friend he knew who lived in Changchun, and that person knew someone else who was from Changchun. And it turns out this lady we had never met before, a sort of a friend of a friend, knew the individuals in the film very well, and you could just. She was emotional throughout the entire thing. She was sitting behind us. You could hear her crying through the entire film, and she told us afterwards that she felt like she saw the characters again. She felt she saw these people again because of how real it was. And that's really a testament, I think, to Daxiong's work on the artistic side of things. But for me as a filmmaker, to see people connect in that way who knew these people and to see how much it meant to them, I can't think of anything more rewarding than that.
Thank you very much for that. So our next question we have is from Finbar. I'll direct this one to you, Jason. At what point was the decision made to use animation so much in the movie? I know you've talked a little bit about this, so perhaps how much experience have you had making films that use animation before?
So we have a small animation group. Partly it's for the work we've been doing in video games. We've also done some preschool series, and we're doing an animated sci-fi series right now. So we have a small group doing that. But I think what excited me about it, there are some like animated documentaries that I enjoy. Like if you go back, even Waltz with Bashir, Tower, last year Flea was really big. There's films that have used the art form really well, so it can be used. But what excited me so much about this was that animation can be not just this decision by the invisible hand of the director, who's like, okay, I want to use reenactments to tell this story because I think it will be a very interesting artistic decision. This was a case where the animation was part of the storytelling. So we have 1/3 of the film that's live action, and we see Daxiong, you see him with fellow witnesses and survivors, and you see him drawing these memories, and you see his own memories of his childhood, and you can see him creating these things. You see the look on his face as he's going through all of these memories, and you see his own characteristics in the artwork that he's creating, the nostalgia, the loss, the longing, all of those things, right? And the pain. And I felt it was wonderful that he was so transparent, but also I think for the audience, it's an opportunity to pull the curtain back. So it's no longer this invisible decision. It's something that is in the film. So it took some feeling out to figure out how much the balance would end up being. But in the end, it was sort of after the fact, we looked, what did we end up with? And it was like, I guess 1/3 live action and about 2/3 animation. But I hope most people feel it's rather seamless. And that's what we were going for, is where are those opportunities to see Daxiong drawing? Even when we're in live action, we see him with his pen, we see him drawing, and we see this kind of transition between the two. So we feel like we're part of the process, and people feel that they understand the creation that went into this on Daxiong's part.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I think the animation is such a great way of really transplanting these memories from Daxiong and the subject into something the audience can actually tangibly see. Now, for our next question, from Jasper, for Daxiong, Are you working on any new comics or animation projects that you can talk about?
想问大雄，您现在在有什么新的作品吗？就是新的动画作品，或者说
我一直在做一些关于中国题材的这种纪实类的动漫画。我前不久画了一个香港的故事，关于香港的海报、香港的这种抗争，还画了一些中国那个铁链女被拐卖的故事，现在都是我正在做的事情。
Mostly Daxiong right now it's drawing stories about China. The recent story he drew about the Hong Kong protests started in 2019, and also some other human rights issue in China as well.
So actually, just to add a little bit to this, Daxiong, if you remember the mass gatherings in 2019 on the streets of Hong Kong, there are a lot of news photos, if you look them up in Getty Images and other places, where crowds of people are holding the same poster, and the poster is one of the there's a female protester who's got a yellow umbrella, and she's shielding herself rather bravely from all of the onslaught from the police forces there. And this really, I think, resonated with a lot of people in Hong Kong. That image was illustrated by Daxiong. He did a series of them, and it really connected with the people. And I felt that was interesting too, because collaborating with Daxiong, you could see how his own sense of loss and longing for his hometown, how he was really able to channel that into what was going on with the people in Hong Kong. He could understand what it meant to lose your freedom, to lose your way of life in Hong Kong. And we were in Krakow in Poland last week, and they're obviously very actively involved in helping the people in Ukraine. And again, very nice drawing for the people in Ukraine and their plight right now that they're going to use for some fundraising efforts in Ukraine. So I just felt it was wonderful how he could channel his own feelings and what his loss of home and freedom meant for him to others who are suffering similar things in other places.
Yeah. Thank you for that, and especially the way that Daxiong is able to use his art to just amplify the messages of all these different places in crisis, I think is really fantastic. For our next question, from Tony, for both of you, are you still in touch with anyone else from the hijacking event or any other people involved in the film still?
请问你们还和当时就是在这个 hijack event 里边的人有接触吗？长春事件的人有接触吗？有联系吗？
Yeah, Jason, I think you talk, right?
I can share a bit, and then Daxiong, feel free to add. So all the individuals that you saw interviewed on screen, yes, we are in touch with them, and the group, the bulk of them were in New York. They were thrilled. The main interviewee is in Korea, Mr. White, and we're looking forward very anxiously to a Korean premiere. He's been rooting us on. He's very, very much looking forward to seeing the film. So he's very excited. And then separately from that, we are also closely monitoring the situation of the individuals who were arrested and who have been held in China. Auntie Jo is a character. She was supposed to be released this year. We understand actually she may have been released already. But we're having difficulty finding her and getting in touch with her. And that is sometimes the case with people who've been in sentenced for long prison terms for sensitive subjects like this, is that once they're released, you cannot make contact with them. There was another gentleman, Sun Changjun, who we don't focus on him and his name in the film just because of the need to focus on a number of characters. And most of our witnesses had given more detail about others, but actually he was intimately involved in the hijacking. He is animated in the film as one of the characters up on the second pole, even though we don't focus on his story. But we understand that he is now released and he is under house arrest. And there's actually ongoing appeals to try and improve his situation from people who are concerned about the human rights situation. So we do hope that we'll continue to do our best to keep a tabs on the people that are still alive and what their situation is. And we hope that the film can shine a little bit of a spotlight on their situations and help those who have been suffering for quite some time now.
Sure.
Well, fantastic. I think we'll go to our next question then. So from Tanya, for Jason, are you working on any new film projects that you can talk about at the moment?
Sure. So currently pretty busy with the tour on this one, which is a good problem to have. we've got our spring and even our fall lined up pretty densely, which is fantastic. But I'm working on an animated sci-fi series right now. Together with my wife, we'll be releasing also a video game, another narrative video game that I'm producing later this year. On the film side of things, I'm almost finished a VR short film that's built in the same world, and I feel like as someone who is in a small studio, but we do a lot of different types of media, I always feel like I come away from each project with some real insights, because I think each medium lends itself to different types of stories and different types of experiences. And VR for me is not one of those things where I think it's any threat to traditional film storytelling, because as a director in film, there's a couple of things. One is that you control the shot. So if you want a close-up shot or you want a wide angle shot, you can communicate different emotions through that. It doesn't quite work the same way in VR. If you've got a close-up shot, it's very uncomfortable. Someone's right in your face. It's a first-person experience. I think the other thing too is that in VR, you don't have an external third-party character that you're resonating with. You essentially are the protagonist in the story. So it's much stronger for putting yourself into someone else's shoes, creating immersion, building empathy. And so what we're doing is we're taking elements of Mr. White's story and telling that from a first person perspective and putting you through his life in terms of what it was like when he first encountered Falun Gong and what that meant to him when he was practicing that freely before the crackdown, what it felt like when, all the confusion of everything happening, when there was the onslaught in the state media and everywhere you look, people were against you, leading up to arrest, and what that was like, separated from his wife, a few things that we don't get into in the film, and just telling that all through a first-person perspective. But we're using some of the world that we've built, and we kind of build out from there in a 360 experience that we're finishing right now. So I look forward to having that out on festivals as well. That's sort of one other related project to bring.
Fantastic, and we can look forward to hopefully getting to see that sometime.
I look forward to sharing it.
For our next question, we'll go to Dan. Are you allowed to show the film in China?
I think if Daxiong or I get an invitation there, it's probably a one-way ticket at this point. So, but what we do intend to do is, and we are fortunate on the impact side to have some supporters who are actually really keen to have the film shared in China. And I'd like to encourage Daxiong to maybe share a little bit about what that would mean. But we do intend to partner with people who've been successful in breaking the firewall in China to get the film there. That doesn't mean we'll be able to monetize it. That's simply a matter of just putting it up and having people, we'll have a Chinese subtitled version. So regardless of what dialect, people can watch it, and we just want to be able to have people see the film in China, not to be able to monetize it or properly distribute it there.
And then I think we have time for one more question from Felicity. Was animation a way to get around this or protect people? I think this will maybe be more directed at you, Jason. Considering the success of things like Welcome to Chechnya in terms of protecting people's identities through new technology, was this kind of a factor in using animation so much?
Well, certainly in the sense that we can't go there to shoot without creating, even anyone who is outside of China would be putting both ourselves and them in danger by going in an effort to tell this story directly inside of China. So there's definitely that. But for the most part, the people who we did animate accurately in the film, we had their permissions. Like, they were here, they're outside, they wanted to do that. We were able to capture their likeness. But in some cases, we were simply ambiguous about certain characters. And you can see with some of the, I think it was important, Daxiong drew some of these characters when we didn't animate the film in order. We did certain scenes, and we started with just whatever Daxiong felt and remembered and what was resonated with him most closely. And one of the early scenes was the TV hijacking, and that idea to be in different living rooms and to see a cross-section of Chinese people. And Daxiong was drawing these different characters, and they really felt alive. And so we took them. Of course, they're not specific people, but they're emblematic, and they kind of represent the Chinese populace and what they've been through, which I think the city of Changchun is a character in this film too. These people are also victims of what has happened. And so we took some of these people that Daxiong had been drawing. We really thought these people had sort of a vibrancy to them, and they were alive, and we brought them through different stages of the film and just wanted to tell the story of the people of Changchun. But of course, we do that in a very general way where we're not pointing to anyone specifically.
我补充一点，在这个人物里，我们主要保护了2个人物，一个是Big Truck 的儿子，一个是刘成军的女儿，梁振兴的女儿，因为他们是年轻人，而且他们正在中国成长，所以我们会对他们的情节会有很多的保护和删减。
In the film, there's 2 major people that they wanted to protect, which is the son and the daughter of the victims. And because they're teenagers living in China, it's important to protect their identity and kind of censor it a little bit of their stories.
That's a great point, Daxiong. Thank you.
Well, I think that's all the time we have today. Once again, thank you both of you so much for taking the time to meet with us. To everyone in our audience, if you haven't had a chance to see the film yet, the film is available in our online cinema until the 10th of July. For those of you in our virtual hub, the exhibits will stay open for another hour, so we really recommend checking those out. There's some really great groundbreaking XR interactive stuff in there. Otherwise, I'd like to once again say thank you so much to our translators here, Annabelle and Yijing.
谢谢。
You guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you. 谢谢.
And thank you too, Duncan. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very
Good
much.
job.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys.